Canadian waterways. It was really important to get these 4 guys down into waterways from a Fort McMurray perspective, just to see and put everyone right into the heart of what we've been through this year. And I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight on such a cold night. The turnout is fantastic. I'm really pleased to see so many people here. And I'm going to introduce Steve Audie. He is the president of the Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo Conservative Association, Progressive Conservative Association, and Steve would like to take the word.
Thank you, everybody. I'm also the regional director for Northeast Alberta, and I'm really excited tonight about all the delegates coming so far and all the teams coming all the way up. Fort McMurray, this is a really, really amazing night for Fort McMurray. So thank you all for coming. Really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say tonight. Thank you, Krista.
Thanks, Steve. Just a few housekeeping, welcomes, reminders, things like that. I'd like to give a little shout out to our former MLAs, Don Scott and Mike Allen. Please give a wave. You may have been sadly not elected in the last election, but you never once stopped advocating for our region. So I think it's really important that people recognize that you guys still keep fighting for everything that Fort McMurray needs and wants, and I think it's important that you guys get recognized for that. I want to give a shout out, for those of you who don't know, I'm actually one of the co-chairs of the Leadership Convention, so I'm really excited tonight to be hosting one of these town halls in Fort McMurray, because it's another step on the journey that will lead us to March into our convention in Calgary. And my co-chair is actually here tonight from Calgary, Cynthia Williams. I'd love for her, everyone give Cynthia a round of applause. She's working tirelessly to make sure we have a very fair, equitable, and exciting Leadership Convention in March alongside me and a whole big pile of people. And I want to remind everyone that we are all going to the keg after tonight to the lounge for a few drinks and maybe some appetizers. If you'd like to join us and have some more casual conversation with our candidates, they'll all be there. From my understanding, we'll all be there. So if you want to come out and just have a refreshment or a snack, you are welcome to come do that and get to engage a little bit further. Maybe ask a question you don't get answered tonight, or something you didn't want answered in front of everybody else, but you're welcome to come do that. And I'm going to invite a couple of special guests we have this evening to the floor. We are lucky to have the president of PC Alberta, Catherine O'Neill, here tonight. And we're also lucky enough to have the PC Youth Association president, Sonia Conta, here as well. So I'd love for both of them to come forward and share a few words with us.
Well, welcome everyone. It is an honor to be in Fort McMurray tonight. This is a special place for PC Alberta because in the rebuild process, I'll always go back to last January. Our engagement team that was helping rebuild the party came to Fort McMurray. I think it was minus 30, maybe minus 40. We traveled up the highway to Fort McMurray and had a great group and a great conversation about rebuilding the party. Don Scott was there, all of our presidents, and a great room. And I'll always look back to that day about one of those special days where people just rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. So it's great to have another large room. This is the next part of the rebuild process. We have 4 candidates that are going to present their visions about how they want to proceed with the party and how they want to build the province. So it's really exciting to have all 4 of our candidates here tonight to answer your questions. We have a live stream going, so people across the province are also tuning in to listen. So if you haven't written down your question, please come over to the table over here and we'll take your question, and we'll try to get to as many as possible, and we'll be talking about the format in a few minutes. But we've moved to a delegate system, and if you want to get involved, please contact your riding presidents that are here tonight. Each riding across the province, there's 87, we'll be electing 15 delegates to go to the convention in Calgary on March 18th. You can either be a delegate or vote for a delegate. There's lots more information on our website, pcalberta.org, and we really, really want everyone to get involved with this process as we move forward. So thank you for having us tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Sonia, who's going to talk about our youth involvement within the party.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I tend to talk a lot, so I just wrote something down on a piece of paper to make this short and sweet. It's so great to be here at beautiful Fort McMurray. Despite the recent unfortunate events, the people of Fort McMurray are stronger and kinder than ever. It is my pleasure to be here with all of you, and I want to extend my huge gratitude to Kristen and Steve for organizing this forum. So thank you so much. As a party's youth president, we have had a tremendous success in engaging province-wide and interest not only in the leadership process, but also with the PC party itself. As to date, my team and I have expanded our campus clubs by 5 times this original count. Our party memberships have also more than doubled. This is just the beginning. In addition, we are working towards electing all available youth delegate spots all across Alberta. This ties in with our youth initiative that we are working with Catherine O'Neill, our president, Project 265. Our prospective goal is to exceed our goal of 265 delegates, but we intend to do more than that. As you know, the youth will count for more than 20% of the vote in March of 2017 in Calgary, which is pretty incredible to think about it. These feats in such a short period of time since the youth AGM last month are due to the tireless commitment of the next generation of our party. The youth are our foundation of our party and our province. Because we are electing a new leader to guide us in 2019 and beyond, it is critical that we listen to the voices of the next generation. I want to thank Jason Kenney, Stephen Kahn, Richard Starke, and Byron Nelson for all their contributions and efforts to bring Alberta back on track. Enjoy the forum, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Sonia. It's such a pleasure to have both of you here representing the party, and I know the party's blessed to have both of you working so tirelessly, especially these weeks, because things are definitely eating up a lot of both of their volunteer time. My last piece of business here tonight is to introduce our moderator, and I think we chose pretty well. He's a really good guy, very politically astute, but definitely very neutral in this race, which is a great piece. John Knox, for those of you who don't know him in Fort McMurray, is the program director for Country 93.3 and 97.9 Rock. And he is going to explain more about the process tonight and how you guys can get involved. We are taking questions over here, and if you still have your question cards, make sure you bring them to one of the 3 of us, and we promise we'll get to as many as we can. Thanks, and good luck to all of the candidates, and we hope you enjoy and learn lots.
Good evening. The procedures for, thank you, Krista, and thank you, Catherine. The procedures for tonight's town hall are as follows. Order of speaking has been determined by random draw prior to this evening's town hall and is the order in which the candidates are seated from left to right. Question cards will be placed around the room and gathered by volunteers. While you may submit multiple questions, we will try to ask from as many separate individuals as we can. So if you submit multiple questions, we may only get to second and third submissions if time permits. The ground rules for questions are as follows. All questions shall be respectful of and answerable by each candidate. No individually directed questions will be considered. The format for this evening's town hall. Each candidate will be introduced by me and then have 5 minutes for opening remarks. Each candidate will be given different questions in sequence by the moderator, that's me, with 2 minutes each to answer. Candidates have 3 blue Me Too cards, as we're calling them, which if a question is directed to one of your opponents and you wish to chime in on it as well, you may use one of those cards by simply holding it up. We will acknowledge that here, and you will be the next person to speak in sequence. I will be timing and will end the questions based on timing, and then the evening will come to a close at 8:45, during which time each candidate will be given 3 minutes for closing remarks. And a unique choice this evening, moderator's choice. As questions arrive from the audience, the moderator, in concert with the team assembled at this table, may select up to 2 questions as moderator's choice. This will allow any candidate to answer if they wish after the person the question has been directed to. No candidate is mandatory to answer those questions, but you may, if you wish, without using one of your Me Too cards. That's the simple format. This evening we will start with Byron Nelson. Byron is a 45-year-old father, lawyer, and a small business owner. A fifth-generation Albertan, his family settled on land just east of Calgary in the early 1900s. Joined the PC Party of Alberta in 1992, maintained his membership in the party ever since, and been active in the party as a volunteer door knocker, fundraiser, and in 2015 was the Progressive Conservative candidate in Calgary Bow. In addition to his PC volunteering, he is an active volunteer with his local rugby club as a coach, manager for his son and daughter's baseball and softball teams, participates in the Freemasons, an active member of the Al-Azhar Mounted Patrol, hope I said that right, and with the Shriners Hospital for Children, where he is chairman for the Shriners Hospitals in southern Alberta. Ladies and gentlemen, Byron Nelson.
Thank you very much. Good evening, friends. As you've heard, I'm Byron Nelson, the guy in the race that everybody wonders if they know. And I assure you, if you haven't met me, you've met someone like me. As you heard, I'm a dad. I have 2 great kids who are busy and smart, and from my perspective, worth trying to lead our province for. I'm a community volunteer. I coach my kids' sports teams, and as you heard, I volunteer with Shriners Hospitals for Children. And yes, I'm a businessman, I'm a lawyer, and I know what it's like to be getting it from all sides as a business owner. I'm also a 25-year member of the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta. I've been a volunteer for our party, I've been a candidate for our party, and I gladly did that because I believe in the principles of our party. But it's no secret to any of us that we lost our way these past few years. And we're now faced with not only the important task of renewing and rebuilding the PC Party of Alberta, but of setting forth a plan to restore the opportunity that our province has lost at the hands of the current government. Today, instead of thousands of people coming to our province, thousands are leaving. The NDP's agenda has in 18 short months eroded business and investor confidence and turned in the largest budgetary deficit in a generation. Today, more families than ever are wondering if their next paycheck will be their last, whether they'll be able to make their next mortgage payment, what type of Christmas they can give their kids. And quite honestly, it makes me furious at the thought of our children, even our grandchildren, having to foot the bill for 4 short years of this government's fiscal irresponsibility. I'm a business guy and I'm a fiscal guy, and I know that a strong fiscal foundation starts with a balanced budget. We need to stop the bleeding, we need to balance the budget, and we need to be the party with the plan. And I've said it before through this race, and it's worth repeating. We will have 2 short years from the end of this leadership selection process to the next election. And spending that time trying to arrange a date with an unwilling partner is not the way to get there. And then we can ask, what does getting us there look like? It looks like taking a fine-tooth comb to public expenses. It looks like investigating the outsourcing of non-essential services. And it looks like a reasonable tax system that doesn't punish us for working hard. Now, over the last 10 years, this province's expenses have grown by almost 75%. We can ask each other whether our home expenses have also grown by 75% in the last 10 years. The answer is no. And we've now finally learned that we cannot be dependent on oil revenue to hide unsustainable spending. So we need to get our expenses back under control. Because if we continue on the grim path that the NDP have led us down, our debt and deficit by 2019 will be larger than the one that Ralph Klein paid off. And increasing debt means making interest payments that could otherwise be used for health, education, or public services. And we know that the NDP has no clear plan to pay off Alberta's debt. Over time, when resource revenue returns, albeit at a lower level than before, we need to be able to use this revenue to pay down the debt and put towards rebuilding Alberta. Because if we didn't learn our lesson in the early 1990s or in 2008, we need to learn it now and to do it now. We need to find ways to support and encourage growth in our emerging sectors as well as our energy sector. We need to build on Alberta's strengths, not through subsidies, but by promoting the advantages of living and doing business in Alberta. And we need to push back against those that vilify us for our oil sands, energy, and forestry resources. I believe we need to refocus our tax structure to keep it competitive to both business and skilled workers and bring them back to Alberta, and to support the infrastructure needed for a well-functioning society. Roads and bridges, water and sewer, power lines, and pipelines. And we need reliable, accessible, quality healthcare, education, and other social services for all Albertans, from babies to seniors. Because that balance is part of our values, of who we are as progressive conservatives. And that means we'll also have to be the party that makes the hard choices, like we did to create the Alberta Advantage many years ago. And that is my vision, and if you choose me as your leader next March, my vision for the next 2 years in the run-up to the provincial election. Because we, as progressive Conservatives, must not just plan to defeat the NDP, but we have to have a plan for Alberta after that election to deal with the NDP wreckage. Becoming PC leader is about living our guiding principles each day with each and every one of our constituencies and members. We've spent a lot of time talking the talk. Let's roll up our sleeves together and walk the walk. I want to do that for progressive Conservatives, for ourselves, for our families, and for Alberta. Thank you very much.
Before I move on to introduce Stephen Kahn, I just want to go over a quick housekeeping note that I had missed, and this is you were on time.
I was under, I know.
Just, boy, you were good. But if you are exceeding your time, I will raise my hand like so, and that's your indication. We'd like you to wrap up in 10 seconds or less, and if you do not, I will interrupt. Stephen Kahn, a lifelong Albertan, born in Calgary, raised in St. Albert, where he lives today with his wife, Ray Lynn, and 2 children. It was strong roots in his community that initially brought him to public service. While living in St. Albert, Stephen was concerned the local needs of the community were not being met. Needs such as building schools and healthcare facilities in areas that required them most. That's why in 2012, he decided to step up to the plate and run for the Progressive Conservative seat in St. Albert. The values and principles of this party, fiscal responsibility, accountability, entrepreneurial spirit, innovation, and affordable, sustainable healthcare with supports for Albertans in needs are ones he shares. Following a successful election, Stephen served in the cabinet as the Minister of Enterprise and Advanced Education. He was then honored to be appointed as the Minister of Service Alberta by Premier Jim Prentice. During his time, Stephen is most proud of serving his constituents, his community, and his province with integrity, honesty, inclusive values, and a genuine commitment to fiscal responsibility. Stephen?
Well, thank you. And it's fantastic to be here in Waterways at the Legion, the very symbol of resilience and courage for Fort McMurray. And I'd also like to just acknowledge all the good folks of Fort McMurray for demonstrating your resilience and courage to Alberta and Canada and the world. But let me start by telling you a few stories. And I'll start with talking to people earlier. Just people look at me and wonder, you know, what is that guy? And it's best explained by telling people, growing up, I had 3 grandparents. I had a wise Muslim grandfather, a really determined red-headed Scottish Presbyterian grandmother, and a really bossy Jewish bubba. So needless to say, in my house, Thanksgiving dinners were really entertaining. But another story is that early on in this leadership campaign, I found myself as traveling around the province, as we all have. I found myself at a truck stop in Nanton, and I was having coffee with my friend Evan Berger and a gentleman named John Blake, Big John Blake, owner of the feedlot and longtime mayor in Nanton. And I was stumping John. I was politicking him and telling him about my time in enterprise and advanced education as the minister, and later on as the Minister of Service Alberta, and of course my time as the MLA in St. Albert. And about half an hour, 40 minutes through, John paused me, looked me in the eye and said, "That's fantastic, Steve, but tell me, what did you do before you were in government?" And I told John the story of growing up in a family business, a software company back in the days before the term software company existed, and the fact that we were able to grow that company to the largest provider of student record services in Western Canada, and able to build that company up across the United States. We had clients in California, and from California to New York, and offices in Arizona and Illinois, and almost 100 employees and close to 3,000 clients. And John looked me in the eye and said, "Steve, that's good. We need people in government who sign the front of checks, not just the back." And you know, I was then able to tell John that I thought the greatest accomplishment of my life was convincing the most beautiful and smartest girl in St. Albert to marry me. And I told him about my 18-year-old son and my 15-year-old daughter and how proud I am of them. And we shared the common bonds about being community guys and sitting on school councils and working on the community boards and being on the Chamber of Commerce and coaching hockey teams and basketball teams and baseball teams and volleyball teams. And you know, folks, if you have a school board office or a rink or a gym or a ball diamond, chances are I've been in your community over the course of my lifetime. And what I think this background provides me with is a deep understanding of enterprise and commerce. But I also understand the values of families and the needs of families. And I understand the values of modern Albertans because I truly believe I am one. I'm a modern conservative. And what that means is somebody with strong, pragmatic, fiscal conservative values and a strong understanding of enterprise, but also an equally strong, progressive set of social values. And when it comes to social values, I've been talking a lot lately about the myth of the Alberta redneck, or the myth of the intolerant Albertan. And I tell people, and we see this all the time, that look, a guy that looks like me has lived this. It doesn't matter, in Alberta, it doesn't matter what you look like, where you're from, where you pray, or who you love. If you work hard, if you show up, if you have a good idea, you can find success here in Alberta. You are an Albertan, and that's what really makes us unique, is Albertans. And I truly believe that's why progressive conservatives and the majority of Albertans cannot support the intolerance of a social conservative political party. And that's why the path to success in 2019 will be a strong, vibrant PC party, steeped in modern conservative values. Tonight I've released the first segment of my business plan and how I plan to help rebuild and renew the party, how to plan to fundraise and reestablish our PC party as a political force, how we, as a PC party, will be ready with strong candidates in all 87 ridings, and how we will be victorious in 2019. And I trust in the question and answer section of this forum I'll be able to get into more details of that. But for now, I simply have a small ask of you folks, and that's to join me. Join me in a modern conservative movement. Join me around my modern conservative values, and we will be victorious in 2019. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Up next, Jason Kenney. Jason committed himself to public life as the president of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, where he fought hard for lower taxes and fiscal responsibility. In 1997, Calgary voters elected him to Parliament, where he worked to unite Conservatives nationally. Since then, he's been voted the best overall, hardest working, and most knowledgeable MP by his colleagues. Jason was called, quote, perhaps Canada's best immigration minister ever. Tall shoes. By the National Post, and also led Canada's two largest ministries, Employment and Social Development and National Defence. As Multiculturalism Minister, he helped to double the Conservative Party's support amongst new Canadians. Jason is now working to unite Albertans so we can get our province back on track and renew the Alberta advantage. Jason?
Thank you very much, John. Thanks to all of you for coming out, to the Legion for hosting us, and especially to the remarkably resilient people of Fort McMurray who have been a inspiration to people from coast to coast and around the world. You are an example of overcoming adversity, not just in the fire a few months ago, but in building this engine of Canada's prosperity up here, carving it out of a sometimes difficult environment and showing us that what Alberta is all about. A place where if you work hard, you can realize your potential, you can achieve your dreams. And Fort McMurray has been that place for tens of thousands of people from across the country who have come here to achieve their dreams and prosperity. And that's the Alberta story, isn't it? For generations, this province has been a magnet for risk takers, hard workers, entrepreneurs, talented people who wanted to live in a place where they could get ahead if they worked hard. Unfortunately, that Alberta is under attack by an ideological socialist government that is slamming on the brakes in the middle of a recession, making a bad situation much worse than it needs to be, throwing massive new taxes on everything that moves, huge regulations, shutting down entire industries, a government that doesn't believe in the engine of our growth, our energy industry, which is so important to this region. And I believe that this is the damage they have done in just 18 months. We cannot afford the risk of a second NDP term. And I believe we as Albertans must do everything we can to prevent the re-election of this NDP ideological government. Now, in May of 2015, 40% of Albertans elected this NDP government, about 620,000 voters. while 360,000 voted for the Wild Rose Party and 410,000 for the Progressive Conservative Party. If we were to have combined those two blocks of free enterprise voters, they would have won 52% of the vote and 60 of the 87 legislature seats. We would not be living through this socialist experiment. And you know, those people say, well, how is that plausible that those voters could come together? The truth is they were together, supporting the same party, this party, for 4 decades before the Free Enterprise Coalition fractured. A free enterprise coalition which continues to exist and win elections in Alberta at the federal level. 13 years ago yesterday, the PC and Canadian Alliance parties came together to form the Conservative Party of Canada, which in the last election, October, went on to win 60% of the popular vote in Alberta, 62% in this constituency, and 29 of 34 seats across the province, with 1.2 million free enterprise voters who didn't show up, 400,000 of whom didn't show up in the provincial election 5 months earlier. That's why I'm proposing a plan to unite Alberta, to restore our traditional free enterprise coalition, a contemporary version of the Lougheed or Klein coalitions that built modern Alberta and gave us the Alberta advantage, a provincial version of the Conservative Party of Canada, or an Alberta version of the Saskatchewan Party. And I propose to do so by seeking very openly a mandate to pursue unity in a democratic and accountable way. And should I get that mandate from you, I would then go on to seek to pursue unity with the official opposition, Wild Rose Party, whose leader, of course, is one of your MLAs, and then seek to, if such an agreement is reached, refer it to the grassroots members for them to decide in a referendum. I don't believe that party leaders or insiders or MLAs should be making such critical decisions about the future of our province. I think we must let the grassroots membership to decide, to empower them in a referendum. We did that federally 13 years ago, and over 90% of the members of both parties endorsed that merger. But we also have to bring in the 400,000 free enterprise voters who voted that way federally who didn't show up provincially. We need to grow the coalition. I believe this province is worth fighting for. We need to get this province back on track. We need to renew the Alberta advantage. And I believe if we unite on the basis of our historic values, we'll do just that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason. Up next, Dr. Richard Starke has served Albertans professionally and politically for decades. Born and raised in Edmonton, he became Vice President Policy of the Edmonton Calder PC Association at 16. After earning a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree from the University of Saskatchewan in 1983, he joined the Lloydminster Animal Hospital. He married Dr. Allison Chiswell the following year, and together they raised their 2 sons and grew their practice. In 1985, Richard became the youngest person ever elected to the Lloydminster City Council and went on to serve 2 terms. He served his community as a proud Rotarian, Health Foundation Chair, soccer and speed skating coach. Dr. Starke, apologize for the mispronounced before, retired from practice and was elected MLA for Vermilion Lloydminster in 2012, served in cabinet as Minister of Tourism, Parks and Recreation, and was re-elected in 2015. A proud progressive conservative, Dr. Starke is ready to lead a re-energized PC Party of Alberta. Richard?
Well, thank you, John, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and to Albertans across the province watching the live stream of this forum. In times of crisis, Albertans have shown again and again their grit and determination. That's what you've shown here in Fort McMurray. And in your time of crisis, and in every corner of the province, Albertans stepped forward. We are a resilient people, and we are a family. Everyone stepped up and contributed what they could to help out. And when the call went out for veterinarians to care for the frightened family pets that had been rescued, I answered that call. Now, that wasn't a big thing, but it was one of 1,000 little things, when added together, that contributed to the long process of rebuilding Fort McMurray. But the point is, you didn't give up. You didn't give up on your community. You came back to your singed and smoky city and began to rebuild. And because you love Fort Mac, you vowed to rebuild. And you vowed to rebuild better than before because it's your home. And I understand that devotion. I understand a deep desire to restore what was lost. I understand it because for decades, the Progressive Conservative Party was the political home for Albertans. Their values and their principles that we shared as Albertans, they were the foundational values and principles of the Progressive Conservative Party. And when we strayed from those values, when we lost our way, people left. Whether in frustration or in anger, people left. And we must recognize why they left. Albertans exercised their democratic right and they left their home. But I have a fundamental belief. Just as the people of Fort McMurray yearned to come home, I believe that Albertans also want to come home. They want to return home to a progressive, fiscally responsible, principled party that puts their needs first. And that's our job. Our political home has been shaken to its foundation. It is time to build a new Progressive Conservative Party on that foundation. Not simply rebuilding what was there before, but by taking the lessons we've learned and building a new home. One marked by unwavering dedication to accountability and integrity. Because going back to the old ways of doing things, the old school, tone-deaf, top-down politics that Albertans so firmly rejected is not a formula for success. It's time to pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and get on with the job of building a new Progressive Conservative Party. It's time to build that home, because Albertans are already shopping. It's time to do our job building that home, turning the lights on and rolling out the welcome mat. And friends, this is not the time to tear down our home and try to design and build a duplex. Right now, we need to be clearly focused on building. Not to some makeshift political amalgamation, but uniting around a clear and positive vision for the future, grounded on solid policies, articulated by a leader with courage, with compassion, and with conviction. I am that leader. I know I can regain the trust and confidence of Albertans. It's what I've done since I was first elected, but it goes back for years before that. It's how we built our veterinary practice, and it's what we've been doing every day in the legislature, fighting for Albertans, fighting for jobs and economic stability, fighting for farmers and ranchers and their way of life, fighting against the punitive carbon tax, fighting against uncontrolled spending, against ballooning deficit and debt, fighting for the Alberta that we once knew a place of opportunity and confidence, fighting for our home. And so I ask for your support. In 100 days, we will gather together in Calgary to choose our next leader. And that choice belongs to you. So join me and we will assemble a new generation of community leaders and builders who will inspire and excite Albertans once again. Join me because I can't do it alone. And just as it took incredible leaders here in Fort McMurray like Melissa Blake and Darby Allen, they needed the combined efforts of thousands to begin the rebuild of your community. Just as I'll need it and will need your combined efforts to build our new progressive and conservative party. Alberta, it's time. I'm Richard Starke, and I want to lead your party and be your next premier.
Thank you, Richard. The next step in our process, I just want to quickly go over the ground rules one more time. Questions have been submitted from the audience. If you haven't submitted a question and you wish to, please bring it up to the table here. All questions must be respectful of and answerable by each candidate. No individually directed questions will be considered. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer, and if anybody else wishes to chime in, they may choose their blue Me Too card. So the first question, going to Byron Nelson. What does it mean to you to be a progressive conservative in Alberta?
Well, I think it's important that we talk about that at leadership debates everywhere we go, not just here in Fort McMurray. But I have been a progressive conservative since 1992, and I can tell you that I have been both a conservative fiscally and basically a libertarian, which is a fancy way for saying progressive, a libertarian socially. And it's very important to me. And as I've gone from being a student when I joined the party to running a business now for close to 20 years, I can tell you that I have those beliefs of fiscal conservatism for a reason. Not because I opened a textbook and read it somewhere, but because I've lived them. To use Mr. Kahn's phrase that he uses quite well, I sign the front of checks. And I've had to deal with government at all levels, and as I said in my opening, if you're in business, particularly in places like Calgary right now, you're getting it from all sides. So it's a prudent fiscal conservatism, but it does differentiate us as progressive conservatives. We're not social conservatives. Right? I'm a social libertarian, which means by definition that I don't particularly care what you're doing, as long as you're not bothering me, and as long as it's legal. That's what a progressive conservative is, and it does differentiate us from other parties in this province. And anyone that's thinking that we suddenly had two conservative parties, a couple elections ago, just is wrong. You don't understand your history. Since 1922, every single election in Alberta has had more than one conservative party. We're the progressive conservatives. We believe in the rights of people to live as they please within the law. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to expand this as a moderator's choice question. So, Stephen, you now have the option. If you wish, you are not required to.
That's an option.
I don't have to use up one of my cards.
You do not.
It's a moderator's.
Yeah, moderator's choice, fantastic.
What does it mean to you to be a progressive conservative in Alberta?
Well, thank you very much, and that's a wonderful question. And as Byron and Richard and I have been at a number of forums, we seem to be stepping on each other's lines, and there's a reason for that. There's good lines, they're good lines, and we are progressive conservatives. And progressive conservatives, all you have to do is look back to Peter Lougheed and where Peter Lougheed started, and what Peter Lougheed recognized, and what Premier Lougheed recognized was the social credit party of the day was a party that's values were misaligned with Albertans. And Peter Lougheed recognized that Albertans were modern, and Albertans had a modern view and perspective on the world. And as a progressive conservative, and a proud progressive conservative, I believe Albertans are some of the most modern-looking, forward-looking people that we have on the face of the earth. And it's reflected in our values. And as Richard and Byron and I are meeting out with people in constituency associations, we see that reflected by the strong progressive conservatives in CAs all across the province. Progressive conservatives are people who stand up and fight for the rights of the LGBTQ community. We're the people who stand up and fight for the rights of ethnic folks in and around our communities. We're the people who also hold very strong fiscal conservative values. We understand the value of a dollar. We understand pragmatism. And that's what we deliver as progressive conservatives. And there's a reason why the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta held power for 44 years. Those progressive conservative values, those Peter Lougheed values, are overwhelmingly the values of Albertans. So I see the hand up. I'll wrap up there. But again, thank you. That was a wonderful question.
Once again, the hand indicates you have approximately 10 seconds left, so it's like a warning, so everybody's clear on that. Jason?
So these are reasonable card here, sir.
No card use
This is a
required
free,
for this one.
You get a free one. It's just like reading a statute, you get these rules.
What we may do on a go forward, gents, is if you wish, you may stay in your seats and pass the microphone back and forth, just to save time. Yes, it will. Yep.
So for me, this is a part of a proud tradition of ordered liberty, a belief in the power of human freedom to help people realize their potential, a belief in the creative power of free markets, that the best way in which to raise the standard of living of everybody is to allow them to achieve their dreams through freedom, to maximize human freedom. And that is the tradition which we are proud members. I was proud to belong to a national government that for 10 years, the longest serving national conservative government in Canadian history since John Macdonald's in the 1800s, that I think struck that balance and was able to expand human freedom by lowering the federal tax burden to its lowest levels since the 1950s, while at the same time seeing family incomes go up to their highest level in our history and in the world, and poverty go down to its lowest level in history. That was a government that stood up for human dignity here at home and around the world. that it was a coalition of people of different interests. You know, I think it's wrong for us to use and apply pejorative and ideological labels to marginalize people. This party has always been a big tent, broad, diverse, tolerant coalition grounded on our traditional belief in the creative power of free enterprise and fiscal and personal responsibility, and that you can't be a compassionate society that redistributes wealth unless you create it in the first place.
Thank you. And Richard, yeah, you can answer from right there if you wish.
Well, thank you. It makes life a little easier for me. I'm so glad this is a moderator's question, because this is the fundamental question that faces us. What does it really mean to be a progressive conservative? And to me, it's not about words, it's about actions. And to me, to be fiscally conservative means you don't spend money you don't have. It means you pay your bills. And it means that you are a careful steward of other people's money, and you're careful with it. But it also means, from my business background, that you use debt as a tool and you use it very carefully. Money can be borrowed by governments, but it should never be borrowed for operational expenses. It should only ever be borrowed to build durable assets, and it should only be done when we have a clear plan to pay it back. That, to me, is what being a fiscal conservative or a fiscal pragmatist is all about. Now, what about being socially progressive or socially moderate? What exactly does that mean? Well, to me, it means we are an inclusive, a welcoming society. My parents came to this country from Germany, and they built a life here, and we continue to welcome people from all cultures all around the world, and we welcome them because we want them here. We're more concerned about where you're going and a lot less concerned about where you've come from. And socially progressive means that we establish programs that help people if they are in a cyclical problem or a cyclical challenge like poverty or homelessness or mental illness and addiction. We try to break that cycle so that they can be helped to get to a position where they are no longer in a position of dependency. We want people to succeed and succeed to their full ability. And that is a fundamentally conservative principle, because at the end of the day, that is better for the person in the challenge, it's better for the state, and it's better for society in general. And that's what it means to be a progressive conservative.
Starting from here forward, each question will be directed at the candidates, and you may chime in on one of your opponent's answers when they're complete by using one of your Blue Me Too cards. The first question that I have is for Stephen Kahn. What is your take on Bill 21 as it affects areas like Fort McMurray dramatically? We have huge challenges regarding transportation, infrastructure, even getting basic food up here must come up that highway. What will you do to reverse this bill or change its impacts if elected?
Well, thank you for the question, and it's a very good question in terms of Bill 21, the MGA Act, which municipalities all across Alberta have been waiting for a very, very long time. It's a bill that when we were in government, we did a considerable amount of work for it. It's disappointing to see the shape that it's become. I think one of the biggest issues with Bill 21, obviously, is how the centralized assessments are impacting every community, quite frankly, other than some of the biggest cities in this province. Particularly Fort McMurray. I know I've been talking to folks in Fort McMurray, and they're specifically concerned about how Bill 21 is going to impact assessment when it comes to the industrial tax base. So, as a responsible government, and any government I lead, we will be thorough in reaching out to Albertans, reaching out to Albertans of all stripes across this province in terms of consultation, and not just pandering to special interest groups or special segments of our society, which is crucial. And I think that's perhaps what's happened with Bill 21 and the NDP's approach to Bill 21 and the MGA. And it's my sincere hope that there will be further consultation, and particularly consultation with communities such as Fort McMurray, so that we can get this right, so that we can get issues like centralized assessment correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would any other candidate wish to chime in on this one? Okay. Next question, please. Thank you. This is for Jason. As As a PC leader, what will you do that will be so compelling to obtain the Alberta Conservative vote to defeat the NDP and form a strong majority government in the next election?
Well, I have a bit of experience in growing coalitions. In the mid-2000s, I launched a huge project to reach out to new Canadians, members of our cultural, ethnic, and immigrant communities who I think have natural and intuitive conservative values, but we're not voting that way. People who believe in, who live hard work and enterprise. New Canadians 3 times more likely than people born here to start a new business. They come to Canada seeking economic freedom. They respect family and tradition and law and order. Natural conservative values, but too often we're not voting that way. I led an intensive campaign that undid negative stereotypes about conservatives across the country, and over the course of a decade managed to double the support for new Canadians for the Conservative Party, going from about 21 to 43%, becoming the only center-right party in the world to win a higher share of votes of newcomers than native-born citizens. I think we need to take that same approach with passion to new Albertans, both whether they've migrated to this province from within Canada or immigrated from outside of it. And to millennials, I think there's a huge number of millennials who are focused on freedom as their central political value, and we need to connect their voting with their values. So I believe there continues to be a huge supermajority of Albertans who believe in our traditional free enterprise values, who are A, split, and B, not showing up at provincial elections. We need to bring them all back into one big, tolerant, diverse coalition. It existed here for 4 decades, it still does federally, and it can again provincially.
Thank you, Jason. And Byron would wish to answer the same question. What would you do that would be so compelling as to form a majority government?
I like the accent you added to certain words there.
Well, you know.
So compelling. I think what we have to understand and what is important, following on what Dr. Starke said, in his last answer, understand that when we're fighting the next election, it's the 2019 election. It's not some election we won in the 1990s. It's not the 2015 election when Albertans gave Rachel Notley the benefit of the doubt because we're such nice people in Alberta. The 2019 election will see a different looking Alberta than we've ever seen before, as they always do. And in 2019, we have to understand that the age of Alberta continues to drop. And that's why I say we can't fight an election like we did in the 1990s. We have to understand that conservative values, everybody in this room certainly very likely believes, are the correct values to move the province forward. But we have to make those modern, current, and something that, to use Jason's phrase, millennials, to reference that age group, that millennials can get behind. Millennials see things very differently than a lot of the meetings that we all go to. When we go town to town, community to community, person to person throughout this province, we go into rooms that have conservative members that often are older. Right? That's typically who conservatives are, because we understand the economic value of being conservatism, and sometimes you have to have lived a little bit to understand the economic value. But we can attack policies that are important to millennials, and therefore grab more people into our progressive conservative cone or sphere. And I tell you, there's on issues like climate change, we can't hide and just say Alberta can't make a difference, therefore, which is true, but we have to have conservative attacks, conservative approaches to many issues that are important to young people. We can't just rely on our current base if we expect to grow. Thanks.
Thank you. And Stephen Kahn wishes to chime in on the same question.
Thank you very much. And since Byron ended up talking about millennials, let me start with millennials. The average age of Albertans is 36 years old. And I think we lost track of that in the 2015 election. Completely lost track of that in the 2015 election. Albertans are young, Albertans are modern, and Albertans have progressive values when it comes to social issues. I find it very interesting that Mr. Kenney wants to appeal to millennials, when I will tell you unequivocally that people who are 36 years old and under are not people who are going to support policy or emotion that pits parental rights against outing LGBT kids from schools. People who are millennials believe in climate change and want a responsible government to take action against it. Fort McMurray believes in climate change and has for generations taken action against it. When Mr. Kenney talks about the ethnic communities, I come back to St. Albert, and I come back to meeting with young Filipino people and young people of ethnic origin who were here under the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, who Mr. Kenney could have helped out, but Mr. Kenney chose votes in Quebec and Ontario instead of helping Alberta businessmen and ethnic Albertans have some relief. I find that very concerning. But when it comes to getting conservatives and progressive conservatives together, what we have to do is get Alberta back to being the most competitive jurisdiction in Canada. We function best, we always have, and this NDP experiment needs to be finished. If we can come back to a spot where we have the most competitive tax system for families, for corporations, we can get back and begin to get back to being Alberta.
Thank you very much. And Richard, did I see a blue card from you? I did. You may proceed. Jason, can you pass that? Thank you.
Well, thank you. This is a great question. I'm also glad that everybody's chiming in on this one. Really, to win that coveted majority, to bring people back to the Progressive Conservative Party, we need to reach out, and we need to reach out and understand why people left us. And we need to reach out and understand what we need to do to win them back. And I see it every day, and I hear it every day because I travel all around the province, and I hear from people who decided not to vote for us, sometimes just in the last election, sometimes for a couple of elections. We need to recommit ourselves to ethical, principled behavior. The backroom boy deals, the way of doing things that was the old way of doing things, Albertans have rejected that. The second thing that we need to do as far as outreach to young people is we have to have a track record of reaching out to young people. Now, I coached soccer and I coached speed skating for years. And connecting with young people and mentoring young people is one of the favorite things I do. And in fact, our pages, there are 27 pages in the legislature. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to the whole group of them and I talked about public service. And I was really pleased, the number of them that came up afterwards and said that you've really inspired me. This is something I never thought of doing, but I think this is something I could do, and I said you have to pursue it. And on the youth engagement file, Bill 206 was a bill that I sponsored. It was my first bill as a private member. It was a bill that was introduced by a high school student to me. It was about banning flavored tobacco. That's how you engage young people. You engage young people by telling them they can make a difference. You engage them by bringing them on board and telling them we need you to be part of the solution. And that means you have to respect their opinion, you have to respect where they're coming from on some of the things. My sons are both millennials, and I know that their cohort of friends, while they may seem that they approach things very differently, they still care about economic opportunity, they will care about having good jobs, and they care about the children that they are raising. And that's why it is important. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question in the rotation is for you, Richard. How can we diversify our energy portfolio, i.e. encourage renewable energy programs without taxing Albertans, a carbon tax, and without hurting the fossil fuel industry and, without hurting the fossil fuel industries, oil, gas, and coal?
Well, you've really talked a little bit about the holy grail of energy, haven't you? And that is, you know, to develop this diversified portfolio without actually causing and hamstringing your economy. You know, the first thing that we need to do is we need to understand that Alberta's economy has in fact been diversifying. When they tell you that we failed to diversify our economy, that is a myth. Our economy is significantly more diversified in the last 30 years. We've gone from being 36% dependent on oil and gas for our GDP to 25%. Now, can we do more? Yes, of course, and we must do more. But in specifically with regards to that, I don't believe, for example, in subsidizing renewables to the extent, for example, as they've done in Ontario. It's resulted in skyrocketing electricity rates, and that hurts your competitiveness, and we can't be there. Renewables are already coming down in terms of price because of new technologies, and they become more efficient. Just earlier tonight, I talked to a gentleman who was talking about solar panels being able to rotate with the sun and being 30% more efficient because of that. The Center for Sustainable Innovation at Lakeland College in Vermilion, in my constituency, has got specific research done in biomass, in geothermal, in solar, in wind technologies to determine how they can be made more efficient so that they're not reliant on government subsidies. And furthermore, on the coal side, on fossil fuels, we need to look at things that can be done with our fossil fuels that people will still need even after they aren't used for energy. For coal, we need to talk about metallurgical coal, the anthracite coal that is mined west of Rocky Mountain House, for example. And we also need to talk about the natural gas that currently we use to heat our homes, but can be used to fuel our petrochemical industry. Because that is one of the success stories of Alberta that, somehow doesn't get talked about. Our petrochemical industry in places like Joffre, in the industrial heartland, where millions and billions of dollars of product are produced and jobs are produced every single year, and yet somehow we don't talk about it, and that's unfortunate.
Thank you. Next question up is for Byron. So I'll pause for the mic pass. Oh, it's already there. Look at that. What role do you see post-secondary education in Alberta playing in diversifying the economy?
It's very important. First of all, it's important that we continue, as I think we do, and we have done through progressive conservative governments, have a highly educated population, right? That's one of the factors that it needs to bring investors and businesses to Alberta. And I backstep and make a point that I make every time I go, that when it comes to diversification, as someone that owns a small business, when someone starts talking about diversification and governance, I start grabbing my wallet in fear that means that as a small business person, I'm going to have to spend a lot more money. Diversification has a bad history in Alberta, and people forget that because their memories are short, but in the giddy years in the 80s, the Alberta government went on an extreme program of government-led diversification. It cost us billions of dollars, but it wasn't until when I joined, the Ralph Klein government managed to say, as Ralph Klein so aptly did, get out of the business of business, and if we build it, they will come. That meant reducing taxes and making environments that were willing for businesses to come here. Now you have to have education, you have to have healthcare in order to attract businesses, and where I'm from, Calgary, got tons and tons of head offices by that. But sticking to the actual question you're talking about, advanced education, we have to have an educated populace, or we cannot expect other businesses and industries to come set up in Alberta. It's great that we have all sorts of availability in the energy sector, but when you're talking about diversification, you're hoping to get outside of just the energy sector. You have got to have strong, educated, young population to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, you've asked to chime in.
Thank you very much. And when it comes to Alberta's post-secondary system, I'm very proud. I'm very proud of our accomplishments as a province. I'm very proud of the Campus Alberta model that sees resources and coursework being shared amongst the 26 post-secondaries in this province. I'm very proud of the incredibly bright, intelligent students that our system produces and unleashes on the world that can compete on a global level with anybody. We have some of the best universities in the world. We have some of the best technology schools in the world, and we're very proud of that. We're not only just proud of the human capital we're producing, we're incredibly proud of the innovation that we produce from our post-secondaries. Our post-secondaries, when it comes to research, are absolutely second to none. And with that, when you look at an engineering school like the University of Alberta, which is recognized as one of the greatest engineering schools in the entire world, and you look at the innovation that comes out of those programs, that you see reflected in the industry right here in Fort McMurray. You see that innovation reflected in things like the SAGD development, the steam-assisted development. You see that in the fact that carbon footprint on a barrel of oil has gone down every year. That stems from our post-secondary system. That stems from the innovation in our post-secondary. But what I'm really concerned about is we've always had a deal with our post-secondary students. And I've spoken to in every campus in Alberta, and students are prepared to make that investment in themselves. They absolutely are. But the deal was, once you've gone to school and you've worked hard and you've graduated, there was an opportunity waiting for you in Alberta. And if we keep moving forward with this NDP government, those opportunities, they're not going to be there. And that's why it's so important in 2019 to elect a progressive conservative government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Jason, you also asked to chime in here.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things. I want to echo what Byron said. Every political meeting in Alberta for the last several decades has discussed diversification. And I would think, well, we think we need to discuss that with a degree of caution given some catastrophic policy failures in the past. Having said that, as it relates to post-secondary, I think too often when we utter the words post-secondary, we immediately think about university and academic formation. And we think too little about technical, vocational, and apprenticeship learning for trades and practical occupations. And I would like to, I think one of the very good legacies of recent PC governments was work it did in the high schools to encourage experiential learning through trades. I think we need to do massively more in that respect. The German economy is one of the most diversified and innovative in the world, partly because 2/3 of its young people from roughly the age of 16 go into paid apprenticeship programs in one of 350 apprenticeable trades. They learn workplace skills, they mature, they become financially literate, they end up at 19 with a trade certificate that is considered as having the same value, merit, and worth as a university degree. I think we need to do that in Alberta because these brilliant young people with practical skills are innovators. As I go across this province and see incredible agri-food operations and light manufacturing operations, you know what? They're typically not started by people with university degrees, but people with trade certificates and practical skills. So I'd like to see us do massively more to encourage young people to pursue fulfilling lifetime careers in the trades through apprenticeship learning. Secondly, one area in which we underperform in terms of our economic performance is information technology. We don't have what they call the brainiacs call an ecosystem of startups around information technology, the kind of ecosystem that exists in Kitchener-Waterloo or the Silicon Valley. I think we could attract some of the finest minds in the world by offering permanent residency through the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program to graduates of some of the world's leading research universities who would love to immigrate to Canada, to Alberta, to help start those startups and employ brilliant young Alberta University graduates to
Thank
join
you,
them.
Stephen.
Sorry. Take it off my next one.
Got the name wrong there, but you know. Well, we got good questions.
At the peanut gallery back there.
Yeah, really. Next question up is for Stephen, ironically enough. How do you plan on engaging youth in the party, both locally and across the province?
Well, youth engagement is going to be critical, absolutely critical. We've talked about how young and dynamic and progressive the population of Alberta is. And as somebody who has a 15-year-old daughter and an 18-year-old son, I know absolutely that youth look at the world a different way and are able to take in information completely differently than a lot of people in this room. We have youth right now who are taking in information and disseminating information in the way that they're most practical, which is through their phones, which is through social media. We must be able to communicate in the medium of their language, which is social media. But with that said, there's nothing like face-to-face conversation. There's nothing like interaction in a room like this. So we have to be prepared to go where the youth are. We have to understand that most youth aren't going to come out to a meeting at the Legion on a Monday night. We have to go to the youth, and I'm absolutely prepared to go to the youth. I know, as Richard talked about, he's absolutely right. As somebody who's been a coach, as somebody who's worked with young people, as somebody who's engaged, who I affectionately call the smartest people in the ledge, the pages, you need to go to them, and you need to be sincere, and you need to listen. You need to ask important questions, and you can't pander. You must be authentic. And if we can do those things, we're definitely going to be able to attract youth to our party. We're going to be able to engage youth to our party. And the most important thing we can do is listen and incorporate what the youth of Alberta are telling us. And if we can do that, again, we're going to be a successful party and we're going to get back to victory in 2019. Thank you.
And thank you. Byron wishes to chime in on that. Byron?
Just thought I'd chime in because this is either the second or third question in which youth have come up. Pretty darn important. And, you know, I want to talk to history because, again, when we go to these meetings, and we all go to these meetings, all four of us, and you see typically not a lot of young people in the room, similar to this evening. It's not bad tonight. Not bad tonight. We got the PCOA president here. We're doing pretty well. I'm happy to see her. But it's an important thing. Now, it's not that youth won't get involved in politics, because we have seen a fairly interesting example south of the border in which youth overwhelmingly got behind a guy named Bernie Sanders, a septuagenarian crazy nut bar, but had ideas that were attractive to youth. So Ron Paul, same thing from a conservative side of the ledger. Youth will get involved if you have ideas. And you have to understand, as Stephen just said, how to communicate to youth and what to talk about. Now, I am a business guy, I'm a fiscal guy. I will talk about balanced budgets. I will talk about having a low tax regime that attracts businesses and political stability in Alberta that attracts businesses. That's going to put anyone under 30 or 35 to sleep. So we have to attract youth by ideas and be aware that they will come if we talk about ideas. That gets, again, to the progressive side of the Progressive Conservative parties often, but it gets to things that are relevant to youth. We can't keep talking about things that is I believe, as the youngest guy at the table, things that are still interesting to me, tax policy, and talk about issues that are interesting to older Albertans, and expect that magically the youth will flow. We have to be talking about ideas that hit everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Jason, you've asked to chime in on this one.
I love my 5-point plan. So here's my 5-point plan to attract young Albertans to our Free Enterprise Party. First of all, I think we need to focus realistically on those who are most accessible to us. They tend to be the ones who understand the value of a day's work, who are focused on concrete concerns, who are more concerned about their job and security than what David Suzuki said on the CBC last night. Secondly, I think many young people are focused on a freedom agenda, as I said before. They don't appreciate the nanny state or war on fun attitude of this NDP government, or quite frankly, some decisions taken by recent PC governments. They want more freedom and less government. That's the Rand Paul phenomenon of the United States. Thirdly, the medium is the message, as Marshall McLuhan said, and millennials get almost all of their information from wireless devices, and we're not even playing in this game in terms of communicating content that is compelling about an economic growth, prosperity, and opportunity message. We need video content, graphic content, social media engagement that really connects. Fourthly, I think a lot of millennials who may have voted for the NDP in the last election will be mugged by economic reality before 2019. That tuition freeze isn't going to lead them to a job when they get that degree. The minimum wage increase might end up with having no job rather than a $15 an hour job. So I think we have an opportunity to appeal to many young people who will be collateral damage in this NDP's anti-growth agenda. And finally, we need to make a very serious effort to recruit credible, accomplished young people to be candidates, MLAs, and ministers, to represent their generation in our party and government, and also communicate its aspirations to us. The NDP has done that, although most of these guys in their caucus are lifetime campus left-wing radicals. We need young people to accomplish something to be strong representatives of their generational values in our party and government.
Thank you very much. And Richard, you too wish to speak on this one.
Well, it is critical, and it's important that we all talk about it, so let's all talk about it. Youth engagement is critical, but youth engagement comes first by respecting youth and giving them a role. And it comes by mentoring them and respecting what they bring to the table. You know, I was very fortunate when I was in my 20s and came to Lloydminster. The MLA of the day took me under his wing and said, Richard, you know, I want to tell you a little bit about politics, and I was eager to learn. And what's interesting about that is that has come full circle, because his grandson is on the PCYA, he's the president of the U of A PCYA, and he's working as the youth chair of my campaign today. And that's what youth engagement looks like. And it looks like with one-on-one engagements. And, you know, I'm sorry, I have to disagree with Mr. Kenney when he says that youth don't care about what David Suzuki have to say. They do. They absolutely do.
That's not what I said.
They care about the environment. They care about a number of areas that, you know, we have to understand what their approach to things is. And, you know, again, I talk about my sons. I, you know, two sons that are in their 20s, And I talk about the cohort that they deal with. And I talk, you know, when we mentor these young people and we give them the opportunity to have a place and to have an influence on what we are doing in government, that is the thing that cranks them up more than anything, because youth want to be involved. They absolutely do, but we have to understand how we more effectively reach out to them. To most youth, coming out to a meeting like this tonight is not a great appeal, but I'm so glad in that regard that we are live streaming this, because that's smart, and that is one of the examples of how we need to reach out to our youth. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Jason. How will your policies, and please be specific, affect Fort McMurray?
Well, Fort McMurray is a product of the energy industry. So my policies are, the first thing I think a free enterprise government has to do in 2019 is to restore investor confidence in this province. Billions of dollars of capital has fled Alberta. One company pulled $6 billion out of bitumen developments and redeployed that capital this year to the former Soviet Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan. That's the kind of result of the NDP anti-investment policies, fiddling with the royalties, bringing in a political lawsuit against the power producers, raising business taxes, raising income taxes, raising property taxes, massive new regulations, future huge increases in power prices. So we need to reestablish investor confidence so that the capital comes back to Fort McMurray for major investments in the future. I think with that, so the job number one would be to say we are not going to fiddle with the royalties, a mistake that was made by a previous BC government, quite frankly. We are going to get our tax rates back down to the lowest in Canada as soon as the fiscal situation permits, and we are going to fight like heck for market access. You know, I don't even think the government of Alberta has begun to do that. If I were premier today, I speak French, I'd be spending several days a month down along the Energy East pipeline route, trying to communicate that Quebecers benefit directly and economically from the energy wealth produced here in Wood Buffalo region. And that they are burning Nigerian and Venezuelan and even Saudi oil. They should instead be buying Canadian oil. So I think we need a radically improved advocacy effort led by the government of Alberta and the industry for market access for our energy industry. And we need a government, as one of my colleagues said here before, that is proud and not ashamed of being the most environmentally responsible major producer of oil and gas in the world.
Thank you, Jason. And Byron, I see that you wish to chime in here.
Yeah, but I'm burning my last card, but I think it's important that we talk about what our policies mean to Fort McMurray while we're in Fort McMurray. So don't think I'm chickening out on any other questions. I've just burned my last card. But Fort McMurray is not only the engine of Alberta, Fort McMurray is the engine of Canada. We simply cannot afford to not take care of Fort McMurray and to chase down and pursue policies that do. I want to talk about two things that impact Fort McMurray directly that I want to establish for our entire province. And one is to bring back political stability. It's not a topic we used to talk about. Jason just hit on a little bit of the political stability, but it's not a topic we talked about when there was 44 years of PC government. But it's something we see in Calgary. Calgary, of course, is a part of the energy industry, not I think as hardworking and as vital as that in Fort McMurray, but it's something we see in Calgary. And we are seeing oil companies, as Jason alluded to, pulling out of Alberta because of a lack of political stability. Fort McMurray is strong when we have a government that understands the importance of political stability and the importance of the energy industry. And as Jason used an anecdote, I'll use one because I have a close friend that works for an American energy company that is determined that they want to go do their operations, their drilling operations in Angola. So they are pulling out of Alberta and they're going to pursue drilling operations in the sub-Saharan Africa because they believe the political stability is better in that area than it is in Alberta. That's not good, so that's one of the policies that I want to do. But it also, as I said in my opening and something I say everywhere I go, we have to have a plan not just to defeat the NDP. It's not good enough to just defeat the NDP. We have to have a plan to deal with fixing the mess as quickly as possible. That's going to help every community in Alberta, but certainly once we focus on implementing a plan to fix that mess as quickly as possible, it's certainly going to help Fort McMurray. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Stephen, you too.
Yeah, you can buy it. Okay. You know, when it comes specifically to Fort McMurray, colleagues up here have talked about the importance of competitiveness and getting Alberta back to being the most competitive jurisdiction in Canada. That will help Fort McMurray. We need a stability when it comes to our politics and our policy and our regulations so that investor confidence can get back to where it was. There was a recent survey that said investor confidence for oil-producing jurisdictions, Alberta now ranks 43rd, whereas Saskatchewan still, I think, is in the top fourth. I mean, how does that happen? We need to also continue to foster innovation here in Fort McMurray and look at things in building more SAGD development and looking on on-site refining. These are the kind of things that we can help Fort McMurray with. But Fort McMurray, as we all know, is much more than just an energy-producing community. We need to keep investing in places like Keano College. We need to come up with solutions for the shadow population and some of the challenges that gives to Fort McMurray. We also need to address some of the healthcare concerns in the hospital and the fact that the specialists are so hard to come by here in Fort McMurray. And in my government, we make sure that we have mobility when it comes to our healthcare workers. If Fort McMurray folks can't get to a specialist, we'll make sure a specialist gets to them. And Mr. Kenney talked about pipelines. Absolutely, we need oil and gas pipelines. We need pipelines for natural gas as well. And I'm glad Mr. Kenney speaks French, and I'm glad that now he's going to fight for pipelines. But I'd ask him, he spent 20 years in Ottawa being able to address that issue then. I'm glad that he's going to speak French and address the issue now. Let's face it, folks, we've had an opportunity to push and promote. I'm not going to stand by and let people like Leo DiCaprio come and insult the good people of Fort McMurray. And one of the failures of our government was not talking about the tailing pond reclamation and the fact that people in Fort McMurray are environmentalists and care so passionately about the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Richard, and it talks about transportation challenges in this northern area. Currently, there are no shoulders on secondary highway 881, which was one of 2 evacuation routes during the fire. What would your leadership in an Alberta PC party do to affect transportation connections to this part of Alberta?
Well, certainly last May's wildfire brought into sharp relief the need for transportation that is functional and that allows for, in the extreme situation where 88,000 people have to be evacuated from a community. And I just want to say very quickly here that my admiration for the people of Fort McMurray for being able to accomplish that in the way that they did. When you consider there were 2 very unfortunate fatalities in a car accident, but other than that, everybody got out safely. That is simply incredible. And anybody who says that there's no culture of safety in Fort McMurray, they have no clue. Because it was because of that culture of safety that people were able to get out safely. So congratulations for that. Let's talk about the shoulders on 881. Infrastructure overall and in general needs to be built out, and it ideally should be built out before it's needed. I'm so glad that Highway 63 is twinned. I came up Highway 63 and, Mike Allen had so much to do with getting that done, but in truth, that should have been done 10 years or 15 years earlier. And it should be 881 that we're now looking at twinning. Rather, we are behind, and we continue in this province to have an infrastructure deficit, and we need, in fact, to use debt, as I said before, use debt wisely to build what we need. A third link that we need to look at, and it's been on the books for a while, and there's a great deal of support for it, and that is a link to the west to go across northern Alberta's Grand Prairie. That is also a valuable transportation corridor, not just for Fort McMurray, but for the province of Alberta in total. And transportation is one of the keys to prosperity in our province. It always has been, and as leader, I would make sure that we do everything we can to build out the transportation infrastructure that we need to ensure the prosperity that we so much enjoy.
Thank you, sir. The next question is a moderator's choice question, and we'll run the full panel starting with Byron. With a PC candidate dropping out of the leadership race due to threatening emails, social media statements, what is the responsibility of all candidates to support both their fellow candidates and the party as a whole in civilized discourse?
Well, I'm glad this is a moderator question because it's also a very important one. Sorry, I'll stand up. You're talking about Sandra Jansen, and Sandra Jansen not only dropped out of the leadership race, but crossed the floor to the NDP. And in doing so, in both occasions, claimed that it was because of treatment that she had received. I would say, as I've said often, that I didn't see it and I wasn't there, but I'm disturbed by the allegations that were there, and I think they've been seen by enough people that they're probably true. I applaud how the party dealt with it. It's a really unpleasant way to do it, but to say we're not just going to say, get a thicker skin, Sandra. We're going to get a third-party investigator, someone with no ties to the party, no ties to the board, no ties to any of our candidacy, to make a report and tell us what happened with recommendations. The report hasn't come out yet, but I expect it will before too long, and I expect that in addition to running this leadership race, the executive of this party will have some recommendations, and unless I'm really surprised, expect to get behind them wholeheartedly. I think that most or all of us stood by Sandra and said that there's no room for that sort of discourse. I think I've talked to all of the gentlemen in this table before we all ran, or certainly before I ran, and we talked about having an open, respectful discourse. I think what people have seen in the US recently, no matter who you supported, whether you supported Hillary, Trump, or somebody else that ran earlier, I don't think Albertans have ever been in favor of some of the crazy dialogue that we saw in the US, and I don't think they are now, and Albertans have an expectation of the four of us to have, as we're having this evening, a very reasonable dialogue, answer questions, talk about ideas. It hurts the PC brand when things like what happened to Sandra happen and gets out there. I've been a member of this party for 25 years. I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I have no interest in the PC brand being hurt. It was hurt, and I will continue to fight against anybody, man or woman, getting that sort of intimidation and threats, anyone in the party, not just candidates.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I very much appreciate Byron's comments. We in this room have to absolutely stand up for bullying. That's what leadership is standing up to bullies. There's nobody in this room that believes that bullying belongs in schools. I don't think there's anybody in this room that believes that bullying belongs in the workplace. And I find it absolutely reprehensible that we would permit bullying to exist in a political forum or in the political realm in any way. And to me, we teach our kids that leadership is standing up to bullies. Leadership is standing up and saying, no, that's not acceptable. Now, I reached out to Sandra Jansen the day after she dropped out of the leadership race, and I was sorry to see her drop out. I think she brought a valuable voice to this leadership and would have brought a bunch of really good ideas to this conversation. I was also sorry that Donna Kennedy Glantz dropped out because she felt that there wasn't an opportunity for a centrist voice in this party. I've since talked with both of my friends and past colleagues, and I truly believe that this party is best when it's centrist. This party is best when we're inclusive. And I know that the issues around gender and issues around bullying are important to Sandra, and I believe they have to remain important to our party. I don't believe there's a woman in this room or a young lady in this room that deserves to be called any of the comments that Sandra was in Red Deer or online. I don't believe there's a man in this room that would let their wife, their daughter, or their sister be called any of those things and stand by idly. So as leaders, and I encourage everybody in this room in your own way to be a leader, we must stand up to bullying. It does not belong in our party, and I agree with my colleague Byron. It's made our party look bad. And I'm here to stand up and say to the world and to this room that bullying does not belong in the PC party, and that's not who we are as progressive conservatives.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with both Byron and Stephen. There can be no place in any Democratic Party for intimidation, for harassment of any kind. You know, in politics, sometimes people's emotions get the better of them, but that is never an excuse to belittle people, to threaten them, or frankly to engage in uncivil dialogue. And I think the question is what can we do to maintain civil discourse? I think to lead by example. I've certainly tried to do that. I have not said a single critical word attacking any of my colleagues here, of the two respective candidates who unfortunately decided to withdraw, or for that matter, the Premier. You know, as we saw this weekend in front of the legislature, a lot of our fellow Albertans are very angry with the direction of this province right now. And unfortunately, sometimes they find wrong ways to express that anger. And I understand, you know, this is important. When we look to the phenomenon south of the border that led to this recent presidential election, we have to understand that there are a lot of very frustrated people, and we can't deny their frustration. We need to hear their concerns about economic despair in this province about the direction of this government. But we need to encourage such people to channel their frustration into constructive and positive engagement, and not to corrode our democracy, the mutual respect that it depends on. And these democratic institutions and traditions, habits that we take for granted only exist because we collectively believe in civility. So I think we need, in this leadership election at least, to demonstrate that ourselves and all the time. Whenever I am at a forum, somebody starts saying inappropriate things about our Premier, I stand up and say she is a talented, brilliant, committed Alberta woman, committed to political service. We need to respect her while respectfully disagreeing with her ideas.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and this is a critical question, and because, you know, and the key thing is, what must we do? I want to start by saying that I've had the privilege of working with Sandra and with Donna. With Sandra, over the past 4 years, she was one of only 2 women that were actually re-elected in the last election. The other was the Premier. And it is a challenge in today's world of anonymous social media attacks to be in public life, male or female, but sadly for the women in public life, the attacks are particularly, they're vicious. And I will tell you that the attacks that Sandra received are absolutely real, the social media attacks. And yes, the bullying that happened in Red Deer is absolutely real, and I'm sure that the investigation will show that. But I will tell you that it is critical that we send the message out that women have a role in public life, and our party has always been very good at that. Our party has to call out bullying, it has to call out misogynist and hateful dialogue wherever it occurs, as I did after Sandra decided to leave our caucus. Her crossing the floor is a loss of talent to our caucus, make no mistake. But don't say, and don't ever say, that there's no place in the PC party for women, because that is also not true. Our president is a woman. Our youth president is a woman. Many of our constituency association presidents are women. I am sure we are going to have many outstanding female candidates in the next election. And I will tell you that many women in our party, whether we're talking about Shirley McClellan or Connie Osterman or Helen Hundley, have been pioneers in Alberta political life, in Alberta public service. So we have a proud history of not only including women, but having women that excel and are leaders in our province. And I'm proud of that history, and I think that everybody should be very clear that women have a place in the Progressive Conservative Party and will always have a place in the Progressive Conservative Party, and I welcome them.
Thank you. Our next question is for Stephen Kahn, and it's a hyper-local issue in this case. One of the hot topics that came up when I came to this town was an area called Willow Square, which is a proposed long-term care construction/development in the downtown core. I moved here 3.5 years ago, and it's still proposed. What would your government do to help with the shortage of long-term care spaces in Fort McMurray?
That's such an important question for all of us in this room, because I believe as a society we're judged on 2 most critical things. One, how we treat and educate our youth, and two, how we take care of our elders and make sure that they have a high quality of life. Personally, right now, I'm a part of what they call the sandwich generation. I'm right in the middle of it. I've got school-age children, and I've got some in-laws who are currently struggling with dementia. And my father-in-law is a true hero. He's a 24/7 care provider for my mother-in-law, and he's doing an absolutely remarkable job. And soon, as good a job as he's doing, they're going to need to move out of the house and go into a long-term care facility. As in government, what I would absolutely do is make sure that we're working with every facet possible in terms of working and reaching out to people like Catholic Social Services, some of the public institutions that perform and build long-term care spaces. That also includes privates. There's room for privately funded long-term care spaces for our seniors. What we need is a broad range of services, because we do know that we have a tipping point with our population, and that as baby boomers are aging, more and more baby boomers will need long-term care facilities. So the Willow Creeks of the world need to be completed. They need to be completed on time. These spaces need to have a broad range, and they need to be in all facets of communities, from rural Alberta to urbans. And we have to also ensure that this divorce by long-term care facility ends. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Jason. Oh, sorry, Richard wishes to chime in. Richard?
Thank you. This is a critical question, and I know how important it's been within the community. First of all, with regards to Willow Square, let's get on with it. It's been studied to death. There is a proposal now in front of us. Let's get on with it, but let's also understand that Willow Square does not answer all of the challenges. The 4th floor of the hospital in Fort McMurray has now for years become a long-term care facility. That is not acceptable, and that is not ideal for the seniors of Fort McMurray. The other thing that we have to understand, so let's talk, first of all, Willow Square. It's a relatively small site at only 4 acres, and so that it in and of itself does not solve the issue and does not solve all the challenges. There is more that needs to be done, and what we need to do, as we need to do throughout the province of Alberta, is build facilities that have the flexibility to allow seniors to truly age in place, and to allow, as was referenced, to allow us to make sure that we do not have this divorce by nursing home phenomenon, which to me is one of the cruelest things you can do to a pair of seniors that have lived together in some cases for 60 or 70 years. But there is more to the senior care thing than facilities. If you ask most seniors, they will tell you that they would prefer to be at home. And so we have to look at a serious and concerted effort to improve and to properly fund home care in our province, because as we see our population aging, in fact, most seniors would prefer to be in a home environment rather than being cared for in a facility. Institutionalized care is something that is necessary for some seniors when their needs get to that point. But preferably, and if you ask most seniors, and I think we need to respect our seniors in this regard, most seniors would prefer to be in a situation where they're living at home, being cared for the loved ones, and being cared for in their community. And I want to tell you, when I did the rural health care review, that was a critical issue. People want to be able to stay in their community, in their home, and to grow old there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, I'm sorry, you are out of your Me Too cards.
Oh, really? I thought I had one more left, sorry. Excuse me.
Jason, you are up for the next question. How would your leadership impact equal rights for all in the province of Alberta, including the LGBT and senior communities?
Well, first of all, speaking of seniors in Willow Square, I was just going to mention that when I was Minister of Housing, when I was Minister responsible for Employment and Social Development, I was also Minister for the Canada Housing and Mortgage Corporation. And then MP Brian Jean came to me just the day I became Minister, actually, and to explain the situation to me. And so I immediately ordered officials at CMHC to complete negotiations, and I was pleased that within 4 months that was done and announced, and the land was transferred so that the province can now build the seniors facility there. So I'm proud to have played a role in that. And obviously, seniors, gay and lesbian Albertans, whatever category of Albertans we're talking about, are equal in dignity and worth and must be treated under the law as such. This province has a proud tradition of that. I can tell you I have a proud background on some of these issues. I was the first ever Minister of Immigration to create a designated resettlement program for persecuted gay refugees, in particular from Iran. I actually went and visited people who had fled potential execution in Iran to live as refugees in Turkey, who were facing secondary discrimination. And I created the first ever resettlement program that has brought well over 2,000 gay Iranian refugees to Canada. The first time this has ever been done, I created funding for gay organizations in Canada, helped to sponsor those refugees, people who had to flee at risk of their lives. And I'm also proud to have worked with our government on foreign policy to stand up for persecuted gays throughout Africa and other parts of the world. We need to stand, of course, here at home, always against intolerance and discrimination of any kind against any Albertans.
Thank you. And this is for Richard. If you do not win, what will you do next for the Conservative Party in Alberta?
Well, that question is a great one, and I'll tell you, it's not hard for me to answer. First of all, I'm focused on winning. Let's be very clear, I didn't start this one to not win. I'm focused on winning, and it's not going to be the Conservative Party of Alberta, it's going to continue to be the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta. Let's be very clear on that. Now, if I do not win, and that is always a possibility, I coached speed skating for too many years to know that sometimes the favorite in the race sometimes has a slip-up. Just watch the 2002 Winter Olympics 1,000-meter race from Salt Lake City, and Stephen Bradbury will tell you all about that. But I will tell you that I was elected by the people of Vermilion-Lloydminster to represent them as a progressive conservative MLA. I will continue to serve them as a progressive conservative MLA until my term is finished, because that is my duty of care to the people of Vermilion-Lloydminster. And a lot of people have said, well, Richard, why aren't you out campaigning? Why aren't you out doing the campaigning that my cohorts here are doing? Why are you sitting in question period? And I tell them quite simply, it's because that's my job. That's the job I've been elected to do, and I'm not going to abandon my people, and I'm not going to abandon my job. I was in the legislature last night till after 11 o'clock arguing against the NDP on electoral finance reform that is being skewed to favor the incumbent government. It's being skewed to favor them, and that's my job. So going forward, I will continue to sit as a Progressive Conservative MLA. I have every confidence that the Progressive Conservative Party will still be around regardless of what happens on March the 18th. And I will tell you that I will continue to be proud to be a Progressive Conservative MLA until the people of Vermilion-Lloydminster decide that they don't want me there anymore. Thank you.
Thank you. There is time for one last question, and it is for Byron. After the Alberta voters did a protest vote against the old guard PC party, they had a choice. They could vote left or they could vote right. We saw the majority lean left. How do you plan to bring the left-leaning voters back to the center-right?
You know, I said earlier that we're not ever going to fight the 1990s battles again, and what we have to remember, I think I said it earlier, but I'll repeat it again because it's darn important, we're never going to fight the 2015 election ever again. It was a unique set of circumstances. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and I can tell you, we'll never see, with that expertise that I have with that piece of paper on my wall, we will never fight that again. But let's understand something, because there's a few people in this room that were candidates across this province. And I can tell you that what happened when you were door knocking at the doors in that election as a PC candidate is that people were pro-PC or anti-PC. Okay? We weren't vote splitting with anyone, and I can tell you as someone that knocked on 10,000 doors and made 8,000 phone calls, and I don't pretend to have done the most of that of the 5 or 6 candidates from that election that are in this room, but I sure talked to a lot of what were Calgarians, because that's where I'm from. Now, once someone decided they were anti-PC, so in other words, we didn't vote split. People were pro-PC or anti-PC. That was the vote. Once people decided that they were anti-PC, as the question suggests, they struggled with whether to vote Wild Rose or NDP. That, unfortunately, and I mean no disrespect to the Wild Rose Party, which holds both seats in this fine city, that's where the Wild Rose was unappealing to Albertans. And let me tell you, I ran for a riding in suburban Calgary. Perhaps with the exception of St. Albert, that is one of the most conservative places one can position oneself in the world. But people in my riding turned away, once they were anti-PC, they turned away from the Wild Rose Party and turned to the NDP. That is something that I would have thought the apocalypse would have come and we would have seen 4 horsemen. It was for people in the west side of Calgary, for anyone that knows the geographics. I'm sure people at home watching on TV will understand that. That is something that wasn't ever thought of. Let's understand that that's what happened before we sit here and say, oh boy, we have to be progressive or socialist or start throwing out money like it's going out of style or start assuming that the best jobs that we can create are ones created by government rather than by private enterprisers like myself and Stephen Kahn. Let's understand that we're never going to face those things as we did in 20, and I should say Dr. Starke too would get mad at me if I didn't say he didn't run as open as he has. But let's not think that we should do anything other than use our progressive conservative values and build this party going into the next election, person by person, community by community. Thank you.
Thank you. There are 3 questions that were submitted. We did not have time, unfortunately, to round those out for the team, but I thank each member of the panel for really informative and well thought out answers that I think shed a little bit of light on each of your candidacies. With that in mind, we will begin with closing remarks and Richard Starke.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you to everyone who came tonight for your attentiveness, for your interest. I really appreciate your being here tonight. You know, we are in a situation in Alberta right now that we need a pathway forward. But there's a saying, there's a quote that really resonates with me from James Freeman Clarke, who was an American abolitionist of the 1800s. He said, politicians think about the next election, but statesmen think about the next generation. We cannot be so focused on the next election that we don't think about what happens after that election, so that we know what we will be doing in policy after that election, so that we have a clear pathway forward to reverse some of the issues that we are seeing today that are being caused by poor NDP policy. And let me be very clear, there is more than one option. One option has been articulated by Mr. Kenney, but there are more than one option. And one of the options, the one I articulate, the one that I have a vision for, because I believe it is the one that will resonate with most Albertans, and that is the option for a new, progressive, and conservative party. It is a party, in my view, that will unite Albertans, because at the end of the day, what unites voters, what inspires voters, is not a party. What inspires voters is strong leadership, sound policy, and an inspiring vision that is clearly articulated. That is what people want to see, and that is what historically Albertans have always voted for. And, you know, I think Albertans are more interested in ideas as opposed to ideology. And I said in my very first speech in the legislature, I said, I don't care where the idea comes from. I don't care if it's a PC idea, a Wild Rose idea, NDP idea, a Liberal idea. What we need to focus on is whether it's a good idea. That's what Albertans expect us to do. They expect us, even when we're in the legislature, in that hyper-partisan pressure chamber under the dome, they expect us to set aside things so we can craft good legislation for Albertans that incorporates the good ideas that comes from all Albertans. This is not about unite the right. This is about uniting to do what's right. And so I invite you to join me. Join me in the crafting of that new progressive and conservative party that we will do, because that is what is best for Albertans, not just for the next election, but indeed for the next generation.
Thank you very much. Jason Kenney, you're next.
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Starke. It's not just about the next election, and it's not about uniting the right. It's about the future of our province. And if this ideological NDP government gets a second term, make no mistake about it, the changes that they will make to the structure of our economy and our political culture over 8 or 9 years will in many ways be irreversible. If you don't believe me, just look at what 6 decades of economic and demographic stagnation did to Saskatchewan under anti-growth, anti-enterprise NDP governments. And so I do not believe we can afford to take that risk. All of the great ideas that we've heard from these fine gentlemen here today won't add up to a hill of beans if the NDP are re-elected and continue to damage our province and its economy. And so that is why I'm proposing that we at least give it a shot to see if there are grounds to reunite the traditional free enterprise coalition that governed this province pretty well for 4 decades. Between 2 parties that are voting identically in the legislature 90% of the time, are voting for each other's amendments 100% of the time, and to note that the grassroots PC voters have indicated in 2 recent polls, 3/4 of them would like to pursue unity. If this party was removed from office last year, I think one reason is that because people thought we became arrogant. And the remedy for arrogance is humility. Humility doesn't mean repeating the word. It means maybe acknowledging you've been wrong, maybe listening to what others think about you, and maybe changing your course a little bit. So what I am proposing is that we open this decision up. It's not so that party insiders decide the future of this party and province, but that tens and hundreds of thousands of Albertans do through a grassroots referendum. Why would we be afraid of empowering our grassroots to decide whether or not they want to bury the hatchet and focus on the future rather than the past, to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us? We did that 13 years ago yesterday at the federal level and helped to create the longest serving national conservative government since John Macdonald in the 19th century. They've done it in Saskatchewan and defeated the NDP 3 times. They have that province back on track. Saskatchewan's more dependent on oil and gas than we are, and yet our unemployment rate is 35% higher. Same oil and gas prices, different governments, different policies. We can't afford to get this wrong. As Premier Brad Wall said in Alberta a month ago, he said, Jason Kenney has a plan to do what we did in Saskatchewan. I hope and pray you follow a plan like that, or maybe you'll be at the beginning of your 6 decades of a socialist experiment. So friends, I'm saying, between 2 parties that agree on where there is no major substantial difference of policy right now, that we at least explore the possibility of reconstituting a big, tolerant, diverse coalition that can renew the Alberta advantage and get our province back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
So I agree with Mr. Kenney in regards to absolutely we have to replace the NDP, but I think what he forgets about his 13-year anniversary plan is that government lost their first election after they came together.
Not Alberta.
Now listen, when I was a minister, every speech I had contained the line about how incredible Alberta was. We had over 100,000 people a year moving to Alberta. That's how incredible it was. Don Scott's looking at me because he had the same line in his ministerial speeches too. And then we moved to 2015, and we never asked ourselves in 2015, who are these people? Where are they coming from? What do they look like? And the answer to that question is predominantly these people were coming from other parts of Canada, and predominantly they were young, hard-working people, hard-working families. And we talked about that tonight. The average age of an Albertan is 36 years old. Albertans look different today than they did 10, 15 years ago. And I'll tell you what, in 2015, that broad section of Albertans, the biggest section of Albertans, could not vote for a government that they believed was arrogant and entitled. They could not vote for a government that they perceived to be playing fast and loose with the rules, a government they perceived was making a grab for power. You know, folks, some people have told me, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I tell you what, I can't believe for one moment that in 2019, Albertans will support a leader that flaunts arrogance and divisiveness. Albertans are not going to support a socially conservative agenda or a cynical grab for power. Now, I know there's some folks that look at the 2015 election and say, we can't afford to split the vote. Well, I'll tell you what, as a business person who used to specialize in data, I will tell you that there is truth in numbers. An analytic study that compares election results from 2012 to 2015 clearly demonstrates that in 2019, should the Wild Rose retain every vote they earned in 2015, and our PC party earns just 16% of the vote back from the NDP, the results will be a 63-seat majority for the Progressive Conservative Party of Alberta. Now, I want to be clear. This is not about putting our party ahead of the province. This isn't about vanity. This isn't about PC right or wrong. This is about a hopeful and aspirational vision for Alberta, guided by values that have always been the cornerstone of this province, always been the cornerstone of the Progressive Conservative Party. Values that have always resonated with Albertans. And by embracing what I call these modern conservative values, strong fiscal conservatism, and a hands-on understanding of enterprise and commerce, and modern progressive social values that reflect the mindset of those average Albertans, that's how we'll earn the trust of Albertans in 2019. And that, my friends, is the path to victory in 2019. Please join me in this modern conservative movement. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
You got me when there's 10 seconds left. That's not suitable. Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a good, as I think we've all said, a good, respectable debate, respectful of each other and full of good ideas. And I think that's enjoyable for all of us. I answered a couple of the extra questions on youth. And I want to say that it's also important, and I'm glad we got to it, to talk about seniors. Seniors are the lifeblood, people that came, as I'm not a senior, that came ahead of me. And there's a lot of seniors in my family that I love very much. I'm, like Stephen, I'm part of the sandwich generation where unfortunately we have to deal with some of the health problems of the generation ahead of us. It's not fun, but it's something that's really important as Alberta. And when I've talked about having low tax regimes in Alberta and a place that we can set so businesses come, we have to remember that when our children are born and then when we or our parents die, it's an important part of what's great of Alberta to have a healthcare system that we can rely on in those awful times. I am who I am because of my family, my kids, and by those generations that came before me. I'm a fifth generation Albertan, and I truly believe, and I'm standing here because I think we need people to run this province who have lived here, who have worked here, who have raised families here, and who want their children to stay here. And I've said around the province, that's why I'm running. Because my parents didn't have that opportunity. When they got married in 1965, they had to ship out to Ottawa, to Ontario, because they couldn't find jobs in Alberta. That's darn important to me, that as I got to stay here in Alberta, I want my kids to have the opportunity to stay here in Alberta. That's why I'm running, and that's why I believe we have to have a plan to fix this place after we get the NDP out of office in 2019. It's important to have that plan, and I jokingly say at times it's not good enough to say, hi, I'm from Ottawa and I'm here to help. We have to have a plan to deal with the NDP wreckage after this. It's not going to be easy. It wasn't easy to create the Alberta Advantage in the first place. It took serious people with serious ideas, and that's why I say we have to be the party with the plan. Remember that 50 years ago, a Calgary lawyer with deep family roots in this province was elected to the leadership of the PC party, and thank God he was for all of us. It turned our province around. I let my family come back and find jobs here in Alberta, and I plead with the party to give another Calgary lawyer with deep roots in this province the chance to fix this place once again. I will close by saying, I think hopefully to my colleagues and on behalf of all of us, a plea for everyone here and everyone watching live to get involved in this process. We selected a delegate system process so that everybody could get involved and be a part of choosing one of the four of us as leader of this party. Remember, March 18th is too late. when you're riding here in Fort McMurray, you're riding anywhere, is electing delegates. Get involved, whoever you choose, whichever one of us, and be part of it. That's why we chose a delegate selection process, and we want you to help choose one of us as leader of the PC Party. Thank you.
Thank you, Byron. I would ask the folks assembled in the room to give all 4 candidates a round of applause in appreciation for their public service and their time here tonight.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming. I would ask the candidates to stay at the stage. We're going to do a couple of photos for all of our media in the room, and anyone who'd like to. We're going to do a photo of all of you. Then I'd like to ask Sonia and Catherine to join them, our 2-party presidents. And then Steve, myself, and John. And then following that, we will do a media scrum to the left for all of our media over here. So we will do